All right, my friends, episode 772 about electroculture is brought to you by the Relax Far Infrared Sauna, which I absolutely love. The ozone generator from Promo Life, which is I highly recommend to everybody. Dragon's Blood from Cultivate Elevate, and the MitoLife's Vitamin E PUFA Protect product. Also, thank you to our newest patrons, Valerie, Joseph, Simon, Kelly, David, and Bryce. You guys are awesome. I really appreciate your support. Now let's get on with the episode. All right, welcome, my friends, to episode 772 of Extreme Health Radio. Today's going to be a really fun show. We've got David Wechsler on the show, and I've entitled this episode Electroculture 2.0 because we did a 1.0, which was really amazing a while back, and that was awesome. We got a great response from that. And today we're going to talk about some other aspects of electroculture. And he's the founder of electricfertilizer.com. He holds a master's degree in electrical engineering. He's been an avid gardener for more than 10 years. His interests are in science, appropriate technology, organic gardening, permaculture, energy medicine. And his work at Electric Fertilizer is meant to showcase his interest in a uniquely remarkable technology for improving landscapes, gardens, and farmlands. And he's the author of books called Electroculture, Electropermaculture, and Electrohorticulture. So for those that follow me on Instagram, you guys probably know we're growing our garden. So the last couple of years, we've been really working on that and focusing on that. And on the side of our house, we've got multiple fruit trees. And then we have other fruit trees, about 12 fruit trees. Small space, but we got lots of stuff going on. And so I'm really excited to talk to David today about this, because although it's really great to modify the soils, and that's something we should be focusing on, bringing in some of this energy is going to be amazing for our yields and everything else we have going on in our garden. So David, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really excited. And so I've been, involved in electroculture for a little while now, probably a few months, and the results are pretty amazing so far, but I'm always looking to optimize. And so share with people just a little bit about your story, and I know you're an engineer, and just talk about how you got into all this.
Sure. So the very beginning, the very origin story of this started back in high school. And back then, my parents got me a mini Van de Graaff generator. And if you don't know what that is, that's the generator that they typically have in science museums. I have that exact same one from my childhood right here that I still tinker with to this today. It's still fun.
That's nice.
And so I was really into science and electricity, high voltage. And I had a science project I was working on called, I want to make this ion ray gun that information unlimited sells. There was a company, I don't know if they're still around today. I believe they are. And while doing research for the report, I came across a catalog that many people have found these days called Rex Research. And this is pre-internet. So you would reach out to them, give them a call, and they would send you a paper catalog that was an inch thick or so. And within there, they had information that they were collecting from all over the world on all sorts of different subjects. And one of the articles that they had, in addition to all the stuff on high voltage I was interested in, was at the time they had 2 or 3 article packs on electroculture. I'm like, oh, what's this? And this was like 30 years ago.
Yeah. Wow.
And it was, I'm like, okay, this is cool, but I shelved it. And 20 years later, or 15 years or so later, I came across it again. And at that time, we were into gardening and getting into permaculture. I'm like, hey, I'm an electrical engineer. Let me give this a try. I'll take 5 minutes. And so we were growing some Romanesco broccoli and cauliflower in the basement. And so I hooked up a quick experiment, taking a cell phone charger, and I hacked off the end and wrapped the wires around some metal electrodes, put them in a separate pot with the exact same soil as all of my control plants. And I had like 30 control plants and 3 or 4 electrified plants. And within a month and a half, I was completely blown away. Like,
what happened?
It just, I still think of it today and it blows my circuits. So back then, all of the control plants, they were about this wide and this tall and sort of like a light pasty green in color. but my electrified ones were towering over it, and wider leaves, larger leaves, thicker stems, and they were much, much darker in color, like dark rainforest green in color. And then as time went on, the growth rate of the electrified ones just continued to outpace the control plants. And before I knew it, they were like towering over the other ones, and the other ones were still small. And so everything was perfectly the same.
So the source of these two plants, like, did you get the electroculture plants from somewhere else, or did they all come from the same source?
Same source, grown from seed. I think growing from seed is the best way to see the effects. If you're trying it on existing plants, you'll see the effects, but much, much slower. If you even see them at all. Growing from seed is really the best way.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. And so what did you notice from there on out?
And just from there on out, it just the more I had the electricity on, the more it would just outpace the other plants. And then we would transplant them outside, and they would continue to do well. And so from that point on, go on.
Sorry. When you transplanted them outside, did you cut off? You didn't do any more electroculture once you put them outside, or you continued the electroculture?
I stopped doing the electroculture because then I had to run extension cords to the outside. And in later years, I started doing it for years and years, and I had all sorts of crazy subs in the garden. I drove my wife absolutely bonkers with wires everywhere throughout the garden. She couldn't go anywhere without tripping over these things and solar panels, and it was crazy.
Wow, that's crazy. And so what were these plants now? Broccoli and something else? Cauliflower?
Yeah, cauliflower and Romanesco broccoli, which grows in the form of a fractal. Yeah, it's cool.
And so, more like the Fibonacci kind of thing.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. Julia said.
Interesting. So the lifespan of those, were they bigger and did they taste better? What was the differences?
Yeah, they were larger, and they had like a richer flavor than the other ones. It was it blew me away. And so at that time I started researching online, and back then there was like no information on electroculture. There were a couple people in some cannabis forums who were experimenting with it, and they were trying it out, but one person would see some results, and then everyone else would jump on them and rag on them, saying, "Oh, that stuff isn't real." And I'm like, "No, this is totally real." And I'm like, and so it inspired me to write a book on it, because there were a bunch of old books that people are still looking at today from the 1700s, 1800s, early 1900s, but nothing really written in the modern context to take modern science and explain how it all works and how to do your own simple experiments that will work.
Right.
And so that's what I did. So I spent the next 4 years with a baby on my chest, on my phone, writing up this new book to explain how it works and to give it a real scientific validity to the mass market that this stuff is real.
So the cool thing is, like, this idea of electroculture is really coming into vogue now. It's getting a lot more popular. More and more people are talking about it. More and more people are sharing information about it. But there's always going to be people that are listening to this thinking, I have no idea what this is and why does it make sense? So just for someone who doesn't really understand any of this stuff, what are the key benefits? What's going on when you do this?
So there are a number of things that happen from a beneficial point of view that happen. So I would say the first thing that you notice is that the leaves could oftentimes get greener. And as the leaves get greener, you're increasing energy production. You're improving the ability to absorb light. Light translates into energy within the plant. And because of you're getting more energy, you're getting more output. You're getting healthier plants. Another effect that you get at the lower level is it improves the uptake rate. So it's starting to pump in nutrients at a faster rate from the soil. And so as a result, you have to be careful with electroculture to make sure you're watering your plants adequately. They'll dry out much faster.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And so as it's sucking in more and more nutrients, your plants are becoming more nutrient dense and more flavorful too. So even if you grew large plants before, now they're becoming more nutrient dense. Usually I hear that larger fruits and vegetables tend to be more flavorless, but with electroculture, they're going to be more flavor dense. So it's a really nice side effect.
That makes sense.
The biggest thing you see is increases in growth rate, increases in yield, and depending upon the variety, you might get faster faster time to harvest, which could be really great if you're growing the types of varieties where, and in the types of regions where you're prone to early frost. So it could be very beneficial there.
And so one question I have about electroculture, and I don't know if you know or if it is known, but what is it doing to the soils? Because we know that everything is electrical, right? Like it goes back to that book, Healing is Voltage by Dr. Jerry Tennant. And in that book, he talks about the voltage across the cell membrane and how there should be 70 millivolt differential between the voltage inside of a cell versus the voltage outside of the cell. That's and right. Maintaining that is really important. And so I'm wondering, like, how is this current in the ground allowing the plant? Are there minerals that the plant can't get access to, but then the electrical current allows them to access them? Or does somehow the electricity create the minerals in the dirt and the soil that's not there?
I think there's a combination of effects going on. So one, by adding the additional electricity to the ground, I think you might be catalyzing some chemical reactions within the ground that might create more nutrients. Another documented effect is that if you have an established electric field in the ground.
So I want to share with you guys the most powerful and strong antioxidant food known to man. This is called dragon's blood. This is a really powerful product. Now, I was recently doing some research on the most strongest antioxidant foods according to their ORAC score. C60 was right up there at around 715,000, which is how they measure antioxidant capacities of food. This comes in at just shy of 3 million. Dragon's blood capsules from Cultivate Elevate are an amazing superfood. There's no fillers. It comes in about 120 capsules. So this is a 2-month supply with 2 capsules daily. There is lots of studies showing their antifungal capacity, anti-tumor capacities, antibacterial capacities, wound healing, alleviation of all sorts of pain and bug bites from the body, wound healing activities, immune support. And this is a really great, powerful product to combine with grounding to get those free electrons from the earth so that your body can utilize those free electrons and make this even more powerful. Check out the Dragon's Blood capsules on Cultivate Elevate today, and the coupon code EHR10 will get you a 10% discount.
It will actually eject or knock off different minerals from or different ionic minerals from the various soil particles, making the soil more fertile. And so,
okay, so it could liberate minerals more.
Exactly.
Oh, interesting. Okay, and one thought I had as you're talking too, I wonder if it's also the minerals are there, but it's allowing the plant to become more able to extract them too.
Right.
I wonder if that's going on. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, with that increased uptake rate, and there you also have this other effect as well, where the electricity has really cool effects, similar effects on soil microbes and bacteria as well. So not only does it increase the metabolism of the plants themselves, but it's increasing the metabolism and the reproductive rate of soil bacteria. So all of your beneficial aerobic bacteria, they're going to be multiplying in size and activity. And so basically, if you have any nitrogen converting microbes in the ground, they're going to be activating on that at a much higher rate than ever before. So they're going to be transforming any of your soil nutrients into a usable form at a much faster rate than you would otherwise have. So you have 2 effects working simultaneously. You have the conversion of nitrogen and other compounds going on, being catalyzed, accelerated by electroculture, but you also have the plant also operating on an accelerated basis as well. And combine those, and that's why we see those massive changes in the output.
That's so interesting. Yeah. A while back, I was researching electricity in worms, and if you search YouTube for just those 2 terms, you'll see how worms are deeply affected by electricity, and so that makes sense that organisms and microbes in the soil would be the same way, because all those are conductive and are affected by frequencies. So that's really cool. So because a lot of people are focusing mostly on fertilizing the soil, which is good, and you should be doing this. But whatever someone does, this is just going to enhance the process all over, right?
Absolutely. It's great for the soil. And the longer you have your electroculture devices in the soil, providing they're not emitting corrosive compounds from whatever metals you're using into the soil. It's improving your soil in many ways over. Year over year, it's going to make it better and better.
So on my list of things, I've gone through, quite a few of your online interviews that you've done and talks and stuff. And one of my, on my list was, using iron in the soils. And a lot of times, the use of iron is disrupting the soil microbiome. And I'm wondering, by utilizing something like copper, that's going to have an offsetting effect with any iron-based tools people are using, right?
Honestly, I'm not that familiar with the iron versus copper argument. I've heard good things about using iron in the ground and bad things about using copper. I think it's just under constant debate, but I don't really know the science of it too well. What I do know is that iron is considered a heavy metal, maybe a lot less toxic than chromium, for instance. But also, copper is also on the naughty list as well. So, what do you go with?
Yeah. It's challenging. A lot of these electro antennas people are using are basically wood from your local area wrapped with a copper wire. And we have about 10 or 12 of those around our garden. And things seem to be really amplifying. We've got a peach tree that's just going nuts right now after we did that. And our apple tree looked like it was dead, but it's come all the way back and it's growing. It's got leaves and flowers and it's going crazy just from wrapping the copper around a local wooden tree branch. And so the copper does seem, I don't know, anecdotally, it seems to be helping us.
Well, I think from the electroculture side, there's so many aspects to electroculture, and the metal is only one aspect. And I think the metal really has to do with the conductivity is a big part. Copper is more conductive than aluminum per se, but you also have the issue of what is the material going into the ground? How does it oxidize or corrode within the ground? What forms upon it, and is it safe for consumption, or rather over time? Because the amount that is going to degrade over time is probably very, very little until your soil becomes acidic, and then it's going to come off at a much higher rate. So that's something that people may want to take better pH measurements of their soil after having electroculture in place. But the type of metal you use is only one aspect of it. Then there's so for these spiral antennas, you have the length of the wire is another aspect of it. The length of the wire controls the frequency that it picks up. So these are basically antennas, radio antennas. And so you'll even have to spiral it up into around a pole. You could just have a wire sticking in the dirt, and it's going to act as a much lower frequency antenna than a spiral. Because if you think of back in the old days, we all had cell phones that had little spirals coming off of it. Those are microwave antennas. And so you're basically picking up microwave radiation, and it's converting into little tiny voltages in the soil. So, which opens up a whole other realm of experimentation for which plant does better with a long, short, spiraled spacing of the spirals. There's many aspects to it, and that's just one form of electroculture. There are many.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because the more you dive into this, you realize it's so nuanced. It's sort of like they're just now doing all the strains of the cannabis plant, and they're finding what strain works for which condition, and there's studying all that, and there could be 100 different strains, and so you got 100 different conditions, and then you have to figure out what dosage of each strain would work best. And same with this, there may be a certain type of electroculture that would be beneficial for, say, like blueberries, that require an acidic soil versus a peach tree or something like that. And I just wish we had that knowledge already. We have to keep doing the research.
Yeah, and there's a lot of research that's already out there, but it's pretty much all over the map, and there's very little controlled research where they kept track of soil conditions and the weather conditions, and there's so much to it. Now, I think today we have a huge advantage where we could take in a lot of this data and use AI, for instance, to crunch it all down and find out which form of electroculture is optimal for these particular plants under these particular conditions. but it'll take some time to get there.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad you're on the forefront of this because, a lot of us want to grow more, have bigger yields and healthier plants. And so going back to your experiment with the cauliflower and the broccoli, so then you got into a space where you eventually got into building devices that would actually plug into the wall, but it would use DC current instead of AC. And that's when you started running extremely low voltage, right? Frequencies into the soil. Is that correct?
Right. So my background in engineering, electrical engineering, and doing test engineering and systems engineering on communication systems and all sorts of stuff, I kind of had like a natural bias towards that world of things. And I started tinkering with what I knew most about, right? So I was building little microcontroller circuits and different circuits of all different kinds, testing out different voltages and current levels and electrodes and frequencies. And frequency turns out to be a very important thing, just as it is with the human body. Our bodies respond to different frequencies, but even more so that one needs to be paid particular attention to is that not everyone is the same. And we as humans respond to different frequencies. What works for you doesn't necessarily work for me. And plants are the exact same way. A lot of people jump on and jump onto the Electroculture group that I have, and they'll say that Electroculture doesn't work for me. And the thing they have to understand is that not only do you have all these variables, but you have to find out which of these variables is most appropriate for the plant that you're growing. And for that, so what we were saying before, it's kind of the Wild West. We don't really know. And we're experimenting and trying things out. There's a lot of background knowledge. And so part of my research is distilling that knowledge down, combined with my own decade of experience, and working on making that happen faster.
Yeah, because you think about people, you have different soil types, clay, sand, all these types of soils that are out there. Plus, you have the time of year, could be different for different plants in different times of year. And then you have, elevation levels, then you have distance from the equator. So you have all these variables, and then you have, what's going into the soils for each person. But I think the underlying idea is that once you crack the code, it's going to work. It's going to make your garden healthier. It's going to make your plants stronger. It's just a matter of finding out. It's sort of like, taking a supplement, finding out which one will work for you versus just trying it once, saying it doesn't work, Right,
exactly. And what's cool about electroculture is that there's so many variations out there. I mean, you could stick on one variation, these antennas, and try 10 different variations, and it's not going to cost you really anything once you have the wire. And you can use copper wire or aluminum wire. It doesn't have to be expensive. You just go with whatever works.
Right. That makes sense. So talk a little bit about like voltage and the amount of current and the difference between current and voltage and what you're actually putting in the ground. Because I've heard you say before that you're working with very low levels, right, of voltage.
Right. So when I first got into this, excuse me, I have kids in the background. Disclaimer.
No, it's all good. I can't hear. They're good. They're good.
Okay. So let's see. So when I first got into this and I was playing around with hooking up voltage from a wall transformer, I thought it was perfectly fine. It was easy to use. Everyone's familiar with playing with voltages. And at the time I had my Electric Fertilizer website. I had a blog. I was communicating with people all over the world, helping people with science projects and other researchers. And my goal at the time was to focus on a form of electricity that would have been very easy for others to replicate and to do on their own. In the old journals, there's lots of old research on using high voltage. And as much as I love high voltage, I think for the general public, you kind of have to know what you're doing because it's easy to get shocked. You could get burned and even worse. So it's just something you have to get some training on and do a deep dive and pay attention to. So my focus was on DC electroculture and generally on the low voltage side. People have experimented on the DC electroculture using voltages as high as, say, maybe 30 or 40 volts in some cases. But I've been focusing mostly on levels of, say, 1 to 5 or 6 volts.
And how would that, do you think, differ from if you're running a copper wire doing an antenna, say? Do we have any idea of what kind of voltage that would be bringing in from the ambient environment, or no?
I've researched that a lot, and it's very hard to find that type of information of how much volts, because it's very difficult to measure that amount of voltage. Normally, like in a typical radio receiver, you're picking up your signal off of these radios and you're putting them into amplifiers, preamps of 100,000 or more X, just to get to the point where you can do your processing on it. So I think the voltage levels there is probably on the level of, just guessing, nanoamps or microamps, a million or a billionth of a volt.
Okay.
Probably not nanoamps, probably microamps.
Okay.
But it also depends. There could be other elements involved. The height of the antenna, the soil conditions, how you're measuring it is another aspect of it, and it's extremely tiny, which is really cool because it's so easy for anyone to do. It's incredibly safe. It's the stupid simple.
I know, right? It's so cool. And so you're looking at like maybe 1 volt or 2 volts is about as high as you're going on your devices?
No, for the devices I make, I generally target between 3 and 5 volts. But I've done plenty of experiments with just very simple solar cells of like 1.1 volts, and I've had excellent results. A solar panel hooked up to the ground. You're just taking a spare solar panel from a broken toy. You could take that and take the leads and put them in the ground and get great effect.
Have you found any differences between, I'm thinking like, tomatoes or fruit trees or different types of fruit trees, avocados? Have you been able to catalog what you found that each tree prefers in terms of voltage? Do we know that?
I have like my own personal database where I keep track of this stuff, and it's to go through it takes some time. But what I found, and in my own research and in others' research as well, is that it's all over the map. And not only is it the voltage and the currents involved and the frequency involved, but it's also the dosage, right?
Discovered in 1922, vitamin E has to be one of the most misunderstood vitamins in the world. Essentially, it acts as a super powerful antioxidant, and it does this by donating electrons, which lowers oxidation, aka rust, from iron overload inside the body. But it's also a super powerful estrogen antagonist, so it's amazing for hormone health as well. A deficiency in vitamin E could result in age spots on your skin, hormone dysregulation, the inability to get pregnant or to carry a pregnancy full term, bedwetting in children, fatty liver disease, arterial blockages, cancers, skin or connective tissue issues. Essentially, vitamin E donates electrons and lowers oxidation all over the body. So it's amazing for any vision issues, nerve damage, calcification, iron overload, and so much more. That's why I like MitoLife PUFA Protect. 1 capsule contains 1,000 milligrams of mixed tocopherols. Use the code EHR15 on biochargeme.com and get some today.
How long are you going to keep it on? How much are you going to back off? Are you going to leave it on all the time? If you have an antenna on the ground and it's just constantly pumping the radiation from the world and pumping it into the plants or the soils, that could be another reason why it may not be working for you. Because, like, if you think of it, if we're taking, some sort of drug that enhances our abilities, and we're taking it constantly, if you're going to take a drug that's going to do something like that, some sort of, I don't know, some sort of a nootropic or supplement that's going to help you, and you're doing that every hour, all day long, all night long, it's not going to have good effects on you. But, maybe based on your constitution, it'll be okay. So that's another aspect. I think it's very healthy to back off. You give them a break. And that's part of my preference for using engineered systems, like using microcontrollers and circuit side design, because then you could control it. You say, I want the dosage to only be on during the daylight. So when the sun is shining and the plants are producing energy, I want it to be in high gear. But when the sun goes away, I want to back off. Plants, they need to rest. They need to recuperate. They need to regenerate. And so there's a natural flow to things.
Yeah. So I've heard you talk about how your devices, you prefer pulsed. By pulsed, do you mean what you just said, or pulsed like, within a few seconds pulsed kind of a thing? Is it more, taking a break for part of the day, or
Yeah,
pulse
it's
every
both.
few moments? Okay.
Yeah, so I have like a very simple device I sell now that just pulses all the time, and you can hook it up to a timer, like a 24-hour timer, and you can set it to do whatever you want, like on an hour, off an hour, and that's a healthy way to go about it too. Or you could have it on during the day or off at night. It makes it very flexible for the user to do whatever they want with in an easy way. And so
Interesting. Yeah.
I think, in my opinion, that's the best way. There are there's this idea of natural electroculture or electropermaculture, passive electroculture, different terms, excuse me, where you're collecting energy from the environment, whether it's in antennas or atmospheric energy collectors, pulling in the ions from the atmosphere and sinking them into the ground. All of those are working on a consistent basis. And so I think there's something to giving, there's a cycle of life. You want to give things a break.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. And you just mentioned how you were thinking about turning the device on during the day and turning it off at night and seeing what that does and playing with that. And I know that there are things that happen when the moon comes out and the sun goes down and the ambient plasma around the earth changes and there's less ionic exchange when the sun sets. Have you played around with switching those two things and doing the electroculture during the night and leaving it off during the day? And if you have you seen any results with that?
I have not. Most of my experiments have either been 24/7 or on during the day and off at night, or mixed, like on for like 4 hours, off for 4 hours, something like that. Or, I'm all over the map with the things I try out. And
one day we'll have a database and we can catalog this into a book where we can almost definitively say, like, a blueberry plant likes this, an apple tree likes this, a tomato tree likes this, and you can almost get down one day that would be pretty cool to know that.
Yeah, exactly. So,
cool.
I think it's coming. There's a lot of research out there, and I've been collecting it for a long time, and others have too. And I think it's going to be a rather large book because there's a lot of variables involved.
Yeah, my gosh, you could do a whole chapter just on blueberries or something. So I've heard you mention this before in terms of like the stray voltage from the power companies and the electricity that they don't use conductive wiring to go back to the power plants. And so there's that issue. A lot of people are saying there's an entire book called Dirty Electricity that people can look up. And so there's that. And then there's also this environmental change that we've been doing the last 30 years. And now most specifically with 5G. Do we know how those frequencies in the ambient environment plus the dirty electricity in the ground, what impact that has on electroculture, or electroculture is able to sort of mitigate that, or do we even know?
I'm not sure if electroculture mitigates it. It depends on, I think everything depends on the particular plant and the environment you're in. So when I think of dirty electricity, I usually think in terms of electrical distribution wiring in the countryside, where there might be just a single wire going out to farmhouses along a particular stretch of road, where it's going out, but it's coming back via the ground itself. I think in that case, I would imagine that the plants that are growing along the return path are probably less stimulated than other plants around it, particularly because I found that plants don't respond so well to AC. They, especially AC at the currents, power distribution currents at 60 hertz, it doesn't do well. I think with AC signaling, they might do well within like a very, very narrow range of frequencies, but generally it's not preferred.
So it makes sense because AC is more of a man-made construct, right? I mean, the sun is DC, right? Everything in nature is DC, it seems. And then, you have man coming along and we're making these alternating currents that don't really interact with nature so much. I know in Europe, I think, don't they do 50? It's
Yeah, 50
Instead
hertz.
yeah, versus 60. We do 60 here, right?
Yeah. And I think within nature, well, if I think about it, I think it's possible that nature has its own version of AC or of alternating currents. If you have like within the soil mass, you're going to have various uh, microbes, even electricity producing microbes all throughout. And the electricity is just going to be buzzing all around anyway. So it's going to be flowing back and forth onto its own anyway. And if there's a route that crosses into its path, it's getting exposed to a back and forth of electrical current.
That makes
But
sense.
it's at very tiny voltage levels compared to that of a power system.
Mm-hmm.
So
that makes sense.
I think that's the difference.
And I guess you can say, a lightning strike would be a form of AC in a sense, because you're altering the voltage at that particular time for just a brief second, right? So that could be a form. What do you think is going on with lightning strikes when it strikes the earth? Is that because the earth is sort of in need of more current, and that's what happens, or?
Honestly, that's probably above my pay grade. But honestly,
yeah,
from my understanding, you have clouds building up charge in the atmosphere as the clouds build up in mass in the atmosphere, and they get larger and larger, and they start connecting from the upper atmosphere to the lower atmosphere. There's different distributions of charge that happen on the clouds. It might be more positive on the upper side, and if it's more positive on the upper side, it's more negative on the lower side. And then you have the ground. How is the ground in aggregate? Is it more positive or more negative? And if they're opposite, then you might have sparks forming from the bottom side, earth to cloud strike, or you might have cloud to earth strike based on the height of the objects and the polarity of the ground and all the different interactions of everything in between. And that's what causes the lightning bolts to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense from a, purely getting back to nature standpoint, where this is why grounding to the earth is so important, right? To stand on the earth with your bare feet, because you're getting some of these free electrons, and that's what the plants are doing too, right?
Yeah, that's right. And in fact, I have my own theory that, if you think about it, people, especially gardeners, they love weeding, even though weeding could be, it's not really a desirable activity in terms of planting and, taking care of your flowers and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But I find weeding to be a really nice activity. And the reason is when I'm weeding, especially with bare hands, not only am I getting my hands into the earth, but my hands are touching the plants, and the plants have really long roots going deep into the soil. And so my theory on that is, as you're weeding, you're connecting to the electrical, natural telluric energy currents in the soil going through the plant into your body. It's like grounding on steroids, because if you're grounding, you're only at the surface level. But when you're weeding, you're getting access to deeper levels of electrical flow through the conductivity of the plant stalk itself. And as you're breaking the plants and bursting them open, just from pulling things out, you're getting more liquid on your hand, which makes the connection more conductive, and you're getting more natural electricity and energies into your body.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, now you're going to make weeding more fun for me, because I got a lot of it to do out in the back. But it's interesting too, because you're also getting all those soil microbiome or organisms on your hand as well when you're doing that. So that's another benefit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, because there is this idea of grounding and electrons, and how electrons interact with antioxidants inside the body, allowing the antioxidants to have electrons to donate so that they can, reduce the amount of electron loss and oxidation. So that's a cool thing. I always feel the best when I'm out in the garden, and I've never really, been a gardener until the last few years when this whole thing happened 3 years ago. It really kicked my butt to start growing some food. And so I'm really excited about trying some of your devices. And so I'm curious about how this all affects. So we talked a little bit about the organisms in the soil and how the low voltage can affect those. Do we know how it may affect things like aphids or fungus that might, overtake a plant? Have you found that by doing this, it causes the plant's immunity to be able to withstand those things?
Yeah, in a general sense, people have been writing about this for hundreds of years, where they have found that all sorts of pathogens tend to be repelled by electroculture. Things from powdery mildew to various forms of diseases could be cured or cleared to 80, 90% or more, like various types of rust type diseases and other types of diseases could be cleared from applying electroculture to plants. They call it electrotherapy. And in fact, I've had my own amazing experiences with many trees and house plants that I would hook up my electricity to, and they would go from being in like a half dead state, because I wasn't always the best gardener, and but hooking this stuff to it would just give it a whole new life. So I would have house plants that would come back to life. I have a pet parrot who would occasionally walk around and chew on my plants. And, they would go from near dead to start sprouting new leaves after I hook up the electricity to it. And my favorite story was a peach tree. I had a peach tree in my yard that somehow maybe it came diseased, and it never produced any fruit in the 5 or 6 years that we had it. And it was all mangled. And when the fruits would grow, there was like this clear goo that would come out of the trunk and out of the fruit itself, and they would fall off early. And so one fall, I hooked up some DC electricity to it for a few weeks. And then that coming spring, we had our first full tree of amazing peaches. In fact, it lasted for another 3 to 5 years afterwards from the electroculture, and it's done amazingly.
Wow, I wonder what's going on with that. Is it causing the trees to build an immunity so that the pests, because you know how like in the natural alternative health world, the idea that parasites and worms and these types of things are bad. Some people have this idea that once you clear your body of the toxins that those things are feeding on, then those things naturally go either dormant or they expel out of the body because you're no longer sick and diseased. And maybe it's causing the tree to become more healthy so those things go away, or the other idea is it's actually killing those things, but it's probably the former, right?
Yeah, my guess is that the electrical stimulation triggers an immune response. And I think that a whole flurry of electrical activity that comes out as a result of it, it's triggering immune response and genetic changes in gene expression that improve the way it responds to disease. That's the way I think it works based on what I've read about.
Yeah, there's a guy out there named, well, he's passed now, but his name was Dr. Bob Beck. And he has, I'm sure you're familiar with him, but for those that aren't, he has this sort of it's called the Bob Beck protocol. And we've done a couple shows on it. But basically, it's PEMF therapy, microcurrent therapy is one of them, ozone, and silver. And those are the 4 therapies that he was, allowing people's bodies to reverse catastrophic diseases with that. It's the best way to put it. And part of it was one of the 4 was the microcurrent technology that he used, which is basically strapping a device to your wrist and allowing 50 to 100 microamperes of electrical current to be delivered to the radial and ulnar arteries right there on your wrist, which is where the blood flows every 4 minutes, and helping to rid the body of all kinds of things, starting with V, and don't want to say the word, but I mean, this idea has been around for a long time, right? This idea of using current to help stimulate immune function has been around forever.
Yeah, and it's just like they've been using various forms of electricity and currents for helping plants and soils for hundreds of years. In fact, electroculture goes back thousands of years, and I think there's a new wave that we could open up to is by taking these great healers of Bob Beck and Royal Rife and so on, and taking their protocols and applying them to the plant world. I think there's a whole lot there that has yet to be discovered. Like I know PEMFs, pulsed electromagnetic fields, static magnetic fields. I mean, there's a whole realm of stuff that is actually rather well documented. There's some really great technical journal articles on PEMFs and static magnetic fields, on their benefits of plants. And frankly, I think there's some advantages to using magnetic fields over electroculture, where you don't have to deal with the electrodegradation problem. You don't have to deal with the issues of of having electrodes degrading your soil and then wondering, is this contributing to heavy metal poisoning in the plant or my soils or my body?
Yeah, it's all so fascinating. I bet this is, as an engineer, I bet you just love, there's so many cool things to research. I bet you just love researching.
I do. It's a lot of fun. It's, not only is it, so you touch on the worlds of electricity and magnetism and that type of engineering type stuff, but it's caused me to get into other fields I never knew I would ever be interested in before, from biology and electrophysiology, how things work on the inside and an electrical level within the plants, to getting into archaeology. I was never really interested in it, but now I find it fascinating how, like the ancient pyramids, how you could take seeds in these ancient cultures to the top of these pyramids and mounds in the ancient world. And as the sun comes up over the horizon and there's a surge of electrical currents hitting the top of these peaks, they're getting energized with high doses of electrical energy. And the societies and civilizations that use this technology, they would prosper.
Yeah, it's amazing, huh? You get into, how they were moving all these stones. I'm like you, once you get interested in one thing and you realize how it affects a lot of other aspects of life that you weren't interested in, you start becoming so curious and interested. And then for me, I start thinking about, okay, well, if you go to Egypt and you start, tinkering around and trying to get access to certain places, and you realize very quickly that whole establishment is very well controlled, and the narrative there is very well controlled. Then you start realizing, why would they lie about who built the pyramids? What does that make? And then you start thinking, wow, well, are they lying about other things too? What else, or what else is not true that we've been told is true? And it sort of opens up, this aspect of life for me that becomes extremely fun to have a curious mind for,
Oh yeah, it's very pleasurable to think about these things. And what's better about the world of electroculture or energetic agriculture is that you could take all of these theoretical ideas and make them practical and apply them to your garden and see the results.
Yeah, it's so cool. I have a few just random questions about electroculture in general. Do you mind answering some of those if you can?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay. Okay. So I'm curious. We have a few raised beds. And not raised beds, but they're still connected to the earth. They're not above the ground. That's another question I had, because I was doing some research on, living off the earth and finding out that for every foot you're off the ground, there's 100-fold drop of electrons in your body. And so, if you live on a 10-story building, you're 100 feet off the ground, you're going to be losing tons of electrons that way. And that's a health hazard. But, for raised beds, is there an issue with the metal? Because a lot of times they're made of metal. They're still on the ground. But is there an issue with the metal there at all interacting with the frequencies that we're putting into the soil?
I imagine that if you have a raised bed that's made of metal, it's going to be if there are any, say, movements of natural telluric currents across the ground, having metal in a round circle, that would block any natural energy flows. Yeah, sort of like I think the word is like a hinge, like a Stonehenge, or you have like these mounds within the earth that were designed in some ways to like block or control the various earth energies. We do that on the local level by building enclosures around our garden with conductive materials, for instance. It's like a mini Faraday's type of cage. I think that potentially has an effect. But at the same time, you could flip it upside down and use that by combining that with a atmospheric collector antenna, say in the middle of your plots, with the positive aspect, the charge collecting electrode going into the center of your bed. And if the outer reaches of your bed are grounded, then you'll have a flowing of electric current coming into your bed, and you could take advantage of that. You could take advantage of your pre-existing structure and make it electrified.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the show so far. I wanted to tell you about sauna therapy. And I don't know if you guys do sauna therapy on a regular basis. I do. I've been doing so for 10 years. And the sauna that I love the most and have been using all this time is the Relax Far Infrared Sauna. And what I love about the sauna is that, A, it's cost effective. It doesn't cost $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 like most other saunas. It's portable, which means if you have a tight space, you can store it underneath your bed. After each use, you can put it in the closet, or you can even loan it to a friend. It's very low EMF. It uses far infrared light, though, which helps to increase circulation, increase cardiovascular output, increase heat shock proteins, which has a direct effect on immune cell function. It also helps improving lymphatic drainage and, most importantly, sweating out toxins that you're exposed to on a daily basis. This is by far my favorite health piece of equipment I have in my home. I'll put a link to it on today's show page or on our store, biochargeme.com. That makes sense. Okay. All right. Now, for people that have raised beds that are above the ground, and I've heard you mention this before, and it's a good idea, and it is running some sort of wire from the actual ground to your raised bed that's off the ground, right? That would help.
Absolutely, 100%. And in fact, I think if you were to do that, I think if you have a single wire going from your plant, your garden space into the ground, that in itself is good enough. But you would do even better by having wires laid in the grid or some metal mesh, perhaps, underneath your soil layer, and connect a wire to that. And ideally, the wire would be soldered on, and then take that out and run it into a deep rod into the ground, because that way you're getting a lot more current flow over the entire grow area into connecting that with the earth energies and having the telluric earth currents flow into the growing bed.
Okay, so do you put a mesh, like just a regular mesh metal mesh on the bottom of your raised bed, and then connect like a copper wire to that? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I would do. If you have it in the layer where the plant roots would eventually grow around. In fact, plants' roots tend to grow towards sources of electricity. It's called electrotropism, and actually, one thing I read about many years ago is that the same thing happens with sea coral. Sea coral will tend to grow very fast on an electrified grid. And so there's some companies actually are improving the marine environment by making electrified coral structures, metastructures, for the coral to grow on at an accelerated rate to save our oceans.
That's really so cool crazy. Stuff.
Yeah,
that's so amazing. It's amazing that, this has been, plants and fruit trees and things have been sort of desiring this forever, but we only are now starting to come back into vogue, what cultures have been doing for thousands of years. But it's just, it's amazing. And maybe, is there a conspiracy about it? I don't know, but it seems like if you can harness this energy, you could spend a lot less on a lot of products that people are selling for soil health and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I think there's, certainly in the farming world, there's an issue with over fertilization. We're getting lots of toxic runoff from too much fertilization, or too much phosphorus, and so on. Where I think one of the major benefits of electroculture is that if you could apply it to your gardens, and especially large scale on your farmlands, in a really deliberate, controlled way, then not only could you get the benefits of electroculture, but you could also reduce your fertilization inputs by a ton, and you could also reduce your pesticide and any of your anti-disease agents, pesticides, by a whole ton as well. You could probably even get rid of them completely because of all the benefits of electroculture against pests and disease.
And do we know, does it have an impact on the water utilization? Does it allow for less water to be necessary for plants if you're stimulating their immunity this way?
Well, it's a mixed bag. So as you're applying electrical input to your soils, you're increasing its metabolism, and increased metabolism relates to increased transpiration, and you're going to dry out your soils faster. You're going to need more water.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. But if you're applying it for a brief while, like say in the very beginning, maybe just a seed stage, I think that effect is probably more it's probably still there, but less pronounced when you're continually driving it with electroculture.
Interesting. And going back to, pulling up the weeds, I stumbled across something recently that I thought was really fascinating and something I want to look more into. But maybe as a listener, you can research this company. But apparently it's a glyphosate alternative, and it's called Live Clean, LIVKLEEN, liveclean.com. But essentially what that's doing is working the same way that glyphosate would do. And they claim it works better, but it's completely natural, 100% natural, non-toxic, all this stuff. But I wonder, do you find in your own garden, in terms of weeds, more weeds or less weeds? Does this have an effect on that?
Yeah, I think that's a side effect, is we tend to have more weeds. It's
everything's growing.
Everything's growing. It's not only... Yeah. I mean, it knows no bounds. It doesn't know you're desirable, you're not.
Bummer. Oh, well, you know what? At least it gets you connected to the earth, pulling them up, right?
yeah, exactly. No,
that's cool.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of, so we just started about 2 years ago, composting, doing a lot of composting, and we're working on, building hot compost and all that. Have you experimented at all? I wonder if that would help the organisms grow faster or the compost to work faster if you put a copper wire or some sort of conductive wire. Maybe one of your devices could be put into a composter. Have you ever messed with that?
I have, and it does increase it. It does improve the rate of composting for that same reason I mentioned before,
really?
Increasing metabolism and reproductive rate of the bacteria.
Interesting. So you could compost a lot more material in a much quicker amount of time.
That's right.
And I would imagine too, the material that you do end up as new soil would be much healthier as well.
Right. Exactly.
Wow. That's interesting.
So many stacked benefits from doing it that way.
Is your backyard, because I know you mentioned you have about an acre, is that right?
Yeah, we're sitting on an acre.
Is your backyard just got wires everywhere? And
like... as I said, we're redoing our garden this year. And last year, my wife got into a horseback riding accident. So the garden went completely bonkers. So, but in years past, when I was doing tons of experimentation, there were literally wires everywhere. I had them buried in the path. And as we're like doing things around, shovels kept hitting wires, and it would go from, they were literally everywhere. And then even in later years, we started tilling soil, and I'm like, oh, shoot, the tiller gets all wrangled up with wires. It was a big mess. So over the years, I've been working on different ways of applying electroculture where it's less wiring intensive. And so
how would that work?
Well, so some of the ways you could do that now is with, you have your antennas. We can have your antennas are right next to each particular plant is one particular approach. But the other approach that I've used is you establish a DC electric field from one end of the garden to the other end of the garden. And I've done a bit of experiment with this as well, and we've had great success with it. Designing various control circuits for controlling the flow and when it's on, when it's off, different frequencies, things like that. And for instance, we did it with a plot of soybeans on one of my partner's properties. And we had soybeans that were like 1 or 2 millimeters larger than those of the control plot. And what's nice about it is that you don't have any wires in between. You just have wires around the outside.
That's interesting. Wow. Gosh, there's so many different ways to apply it, right?
Yeah. And that's just one approach. There are many.
And do you have any livestock like chickens or goats or anything? And have you seen anecdotally through your network of people that its effect on laying eggs and things? Or
I have done it on my chickens. I do have 11 chickens currently, and I'm not sure I have seen the effect on eggs. I try to think of things from a scientific point of view first before I go into the woo, which I'm a firm believer in, but I try to find like the scientific backed ways of looking at things first. So it's hard for me to say exactly. I have seen online that there's been a lot of people have been talking about how animals have some sort of preference for laying down next to their electroculture antennas and things like that. So I've also read that many years ago that fish are attracted to electroculture setups. I've seen I've seen collaborators who are doing aquaculture, growing food in fish-based environments, that where they would have electrodes in the soil, in the water medium, and the fish would naturally be attracted towards being closer to that source of electricity, and they would tend to grow faster as a result of it. In fact, I think I've even seen some companies have electronic fish hooks with the hope that the fish will be more likely to grab the bait.
Gosh, it's so wild. I mean, for people that do aquaponics, that would be really cool. Wow.
There's so much you could do. I mean, if you're growing aquaponics, is not only are you helping you just think of all the layering of the systems. Not only are you making the plants grow better in the aquaponics, but you're also helping to break down the fish poop from the bacterial point of view into a more usable form faster. You could use, you could just be more efficient with everything, and you're creating a more healthy environment.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a greenhouse on your property?
Not really.
No?
We had one, but we placed it over a area where there were some terrible vines, maybe kudzu, growing underneath it. So it gets overwhelmed with it. I got to tear it down and start fresh.
That's interesting, because I'm thinking about, my wife was wanting to get a greenhouse recently, and because she's growing a lot of things from seed. And I remember the book, The Ringing Cedars of Russia. I think it was the Anastasia series, where she would talk about, putting your saliva on the seed and letting it dry. And because your DNA then gets imbued into the seed before you sprout it. And I'm just wondering if there's any aspect of electroculture that could be applied to someone starting from seed in like a greenhouse situation.
Oh, absolutely. There's so many ways. So in lieu of having a greenhouse, I have a basement with grow lights, and I grow stuff in the basement, oftentimes in prep for springtime. And I've done tons of experiments in the basement, from having these DC electroculture setups to testing various types of more passive systems, from coils to coils of wire, the spiral antennas, high voltage. I've had high voltage setups in my basement before, and there's all sorts of things you could do in a greenhouse.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love that. All right, so explain a little bit about your products and so you have a Facebook community, right, where people can connect with you and connect with others that are applying some of your techniques. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we have the Energetic Agriculture Facebook group. It's growing like mad. We've hit over 100,000 members.
Whoa, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's grown like absolutely crazy within 5 months.
Wow, that shows people are interested in this stuff, right?
Oh, it's wonderful. And it's really great to see people experimenting and encouraging each other and trying out some different ideas. And people are being artists and creating interesting creations involving crystals. And there's all sorts of really cool debates, mixing science and metaphysics and frequency, and it's golden. It's awesome stuff.
That's so cool. Yeah, I have on my list of things to ask you about crystals. Before we get into your website too, what are your thoughts on utilizing crystal energy along with the copper or this frequency that you're doing? Do you have products that utilize crystals?
I don't have any that use crystals at this time. We're considering it for the future, but I believe in testing for efficacy before I put stuff on the market. So I think a lot more research is needed. Some people have, I've yet to see really firm evidence that crystals do make a difference. Yet on a personal level, with our human biology, I know that crystals do make a difference. I know, I mean, crystals have been a part of ancient cultures forever. And for in the last maybe 4 or 5 years, I've had my first crystal experience that just blew me away. So, for example, I keep close to me here a Shiva lingam. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but these come from a particular river in India.
Okay,
and most of the rocks look like this or some variation of it. But when I saw this in rock shops for years, and then a few years ago I decided to buy one. And the night that I bought this, I was on a business trip and I was up all night long. I couldn't sleep. I was completely wired with energy, and I felt these energy movements. Even right now, just holding this for the first time in my life, I feel like this warmth coming through my body and my crown tingling.
Wow.
And so I keep this with me whenever I want to get a quick recharge, and it works. It's like the first crystal that ever had like a real effect on me.
Wow.
And then since then, I've learned that if I vibe myself up using various types of techniques, I can then touch other types of crystals and get similar effects. But when I'm not vibed up, I don't feel anything, which kind of makes sense to me. Like they're kind of a higher order type of energetic thing, and you have to be on the same carrier frequency to connect with it.
Yeah, and I've heard years, people talking about our crystal body and how we're crystalline in nature and things like that, and conductive, magnetic conductive and stuff like that. So it makes sense that there would be a resonance with crystals, specifically with human bodies, but also with plants too. So that's cool that you're doing some research on that. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I think it's there. That is probably a topic for a whole other show. There's so much cool stuff out there that's on the fringes, on the woo side of things, that we have yet to discover. From, I would like to get in touch with some, say, medical intuitives who have that ability to have that, what's it called, say, second sight, where they can really, they could see those, like medical intuitives. I don't know if you're familiar with the books by Barbara Brennan, for instance, like Hands of Light. It's one of my favorite books. And you see this amazing imagery of these cords and cones coming out of your energy centers and things like that. And it'd be really cool to partner up with someone like that and document, what's going on with crystals, with people, and then take it to the plant world. Are there any energy centers within the plant world that we don't know about? Do they have a chakra system? What influences those types of things?
Yeah, it's interesting. Speaking of that, because there's those experiments. I think that book "Secret Life of Plants" that was written decades ago talks about plants having some sort of ability, almost like a nervous system, where they're able to understand when someone's about to cut one of their leaves off, and they emit a frequency that's been measured, apparently, that plants can actually anticipate some form of danger. And I think you've mentioned this too before, where plants and trees intrinsically know when a lightning strike is going to happen, for example. But they know, and this has been measured before, so that opens up just a flood of questions, and how are they detecting this? And this anticipatory nature seems to be something that's only human, but not so much if plants are able to do this as well. It's so fascinating. I mean, the more you get into it, you're just blown away, Yeah.
And what's really cool is there's a group that I just recently joined. It's called the Society for Scientific Exploration. And it's filled with PhDs and scientists from all over the globe who do hardcore research into these exact areas. And so I'm so excited to be a part of this group and to dive into more of the scientific side of ESP and consciousness phenomena, and see how we could apply it in a practical manner to the growing of our plants and farms.
It's so cool because, if you think about the sun bringing, basically a DC electric current, photonic energy to the plants, and, the food web is entirely tied to photonic energy. And when we're consuming food, we're basically eating packets of light that interacts with our gut microbiome. And you're looking at different aspects of people doing things that are similar, but not quite what you're doing. Like years ago, there was this company, you probably know about this, Sonic Bloom, that was using sound and frequencies. And, that's essentially playing music to your plants. And they were having some great results too, weren't they?
Yeah, exactly. You're playing music or the sounds of birds chirping. And amazing stuff.
So
Energies of all different kinds. There's a guy who I know about who applies vibration to plants. He'll make plants vibrate at certain frequencies, and he'll promote them to experience increases in growth.
My gosh, that's so cool. Okay, so for people that are interested in what you have going on, you can find so there's a link to the Facebook group that we mentioned at electricfertilizer.com. And on that page, there's also a link to the store that you have. And I want to tell people about some of the products you have there, which they're not thousands of dollars. They're like $15, $50, $30, 20, 29, 20. So these things are extremely affordable. And I'm looking at your different products. And as a consumer, I'm thinking, I want to get some for my side yard with my 6 fruit trees out there. I don't know what to get and where to start. So what would you suggest for people to look at if they're looking at trees, for example?
So there are many ways to get started. And, if you out in the open web, the easiest way to get started is with some simple wire. Get some wire and have an antenna or make a coil that you around a stick, for instance, and place into the soil. One of the, there's a famous Italian energy researcher who goes by name of, his last name is Igina, and he would make these coils in the form of a conical spiral. And so to make these conical spirals, you could wrap it around like a stick and pull it out. Or I sell like this 3D printed mold that you could wrap it around. You can make these spirals very quickly. That's one approach. Other things.
Now that one, it looks like it's called the IGHINA. That's what you just said, right? The Igana. So that one's $50. Is that something that's plugged into the wall or no?
No, it's a spiral form that basically allows you to wrap it around and have that form. And it comes with a roll of wire that you could just, if you're going to do a whole bunch of plants, you want to have the form so you could do things very quickly and have a roll of wire, some snips, and you could do a whole field very quickly. Some of the other products I have some examples here are this, for instance. Actually, this is a version that's not yet on the website. This one has a piece of wire coming out of it, but this is called a paramagnetic cone. And so these pick up Schumann resonance waves from the atmosphere, and they concentrate local magnetic field energy, local geomagnetic field energy, and they concentrate it within the cone and allows the surrounding environment to pick up on these local energies. I have a wire coming out of it. So if you want to attach this to some other plants, wrap a wire around here and connect it down a row and connect it to other plants to try it out, you could do so. So these are paramagnetic energy cones. And I have a brand new product that's coming out.
Yeah, you showed me this before we started recording so people can see that are watching on video. This is really cool.
Yeah, so people are making high voltage, or not high voltage, atmospheric energy collectors. So if you go, as you were saying before, as you go higher up in elevation, there's a greater amount of charge concentration in the atmosphere.
I am such a huge fan of ozone therapy. To me, having your own ozone machine for you and your family is like having a doctor, a hospital, and even an emergency room all in your own home. In my opinion, it's the single most important piece of equipment you can own. So what is ozone? Well, ozone is essentially a molecule with 3 oxygen atoms attached, and the synergy of what that does inside the human body is absolutely astounding. It is completely safe. It's been used since 1856 to disinfect operating room tables. It can be used topically for bacterial infections or the V word, which we can't pronounce these days. It's antifungal, it's antiparasitic, it's anti-yeast. It activates both arms of the immune system. It can be used externally on non-healing wounds, on ulcers. It can be used rectally for systemic whole body treatments to improve liver function, to help prevent diseases. And it can be applied topically as an oil to the skin for virtually any skin condition. You can use it in saline water for eye drops. Some people breathe the gas through olive oil. You can do sinus, ear, rectal, and vaginal insufflations. You can even drink the water, which is what I do. Or you can use the water as a sanitizer for vegetables. You can spray it on your skin for any wounds. You can use it on yeast infections for your dogs and spray it on your plants. We've done both of those. You can even do full body ozone bagging or ozone sauna sessions using our relaxed far infrared sauna. And you can do injections with it, which is called prolozone. I've had that done as well. Typically IV is the standard, but it's been shown that rectal insufflations is about 94% as effective as IV therapies, minus the drive time, the money, the needle sticks in your veins. You don't want any of that. So my favorite machine is from Promo Life. They use a cold corona discharge on their ceramic cells. They have adjustable detectable ozone levels, which is really important for an ozone machine. They're made in the USA. They have free shipping over $99 to the continental United States, but they ship worldwide as well. They've been the industry leader since 1999. They have awesome customer service. They have a lifetime warranty, a 30-day money-back guarantee. And if you use our code EHR10, you'll get 10% off. So check it out on today's show page or on biochargeme.com.
And so what people are doing is they're making their own antennas, being very creative, and it's amazingly awesome. I love the artistic side of electroculture. Yeah. And so I have my own product that concentrates the number of points that are available. And this is a new website that my partner and I are working on, energeticgrowers.com.
Okay, so for those that are, listening on audio, it looks basically almost like a SPIKEPROTEIN or a VIRUS. It almost looks like one of those with all the little things coming off of it, right?
That's right. It does look like one of those. That's awesome.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So basically this guy is designed to maximize the collection of energy from the atmosphere and has over 100, maybe 128 points of gold-plated tips that pick up that as you install this into the upper atmosphere, it's going to collect a whole ton of electricity and run it down this cable and into your garden system. And what's nice about having lots and lots of spikes is that you don't have to put this up 20, 30 feet in the air. You could probably get by with just sticking it 10 to 12 feet in the air.
So what would you attach that to? Something longer?
So you would attach this to a long pole. So for instance, in my yard, we grow bamboo. You could also attach it to some PVC or even to the side of a building, as long as it's higher than the building.
Okay.
Yeah. So there are all sorts of ways of doing it. And then the kit here, it comes with the rod, some bolts, and it comes with a waterproof wire nut that you would attach from here to some sort of cabling that you would provide, some sort of maybe 18 to 24 gauge wire of your choosing. And you would connect it with the waterproof wire nut to this guy. And you would run it down into the dirt next to your plant or into your garden bed in various ways. And then you have a natural electroculture system at work.
Okay, so now how much square footage do you think that would impact ground square footage on your soils?
The square footage, it's going to depend on the height. It's going to depend on your soil conditions, your soil moisture, the fertility of your soil, and how you lay this out in the soil and the grounding around it. So it's highly experimental. But okay. I would say probably at least 5 to 10 foot in radius at a minimum. And depending upon how you lay it out, it could go out beyond that.
Okay, so we have an area that's
could probably go out much further than that too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have an area that's about 50 feet long on the side of our house, about 4 feet in depth. So we probably could utilize 2 or 3 of those just on the side yard or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. This is very cool. And so if people have questions, because everyone has such different setups, some people are just growing sprouts in their kitchen. Some people are in a second story with a balcony and they're just doing raised beds, or some people have full farm systems in urban areas. If they want to contact you, would the Facebook group, because I know there's a consulting tab on your website, what's the best for people, do you think?
So in a general sense, the best way to get feedback on electroculture is to go to our Facebook group. But if you want to reach me personally, I could be reached through the contact page on my website. Fill out the form and reach out to me.
And what was the website for the new project for that product? I want to make sure and put that in the show notes too.
Sure. So our new website that we're working on right now is energeticgrowers.com.
Energetic, let me put that in, GROWERS.com, right? Energetic growers. So there we go.
Yeah.
Over 200% larger plants. Oh, wow. That's cool. Is that your website? Where it says over 200% larger plants. Okay.
Yep. That's my partner, Ray Bacon. He's he's based out of Italy.
Wow. Oh my goodness. So I'm looking at this photo on there. It looks like a picture of an older gentleman holding or next to a pumpkin. It looks like it's massive. And I remember seeing pictures of this, people utilizing Ormus to do this. But my goodness, with all these different things, you could combine so many things together to get such great effects, couldn't you?
Right, exactly. So that pumpkin is grown by this French guy with the last name I think Mehdi, and that's a record-breaking pumpkin that was grown using some electroculture techniques.
No way. That's so cool. Very cool. Wow. And look, you have a pyramid on here too.
Yeah. So pyramid energy,
cool.
you know, it's crazy. You know, I've always, earlier in my electroculture career, I've always been attracted to pyramids, as we all have been. And I didn't really believe it. But once I started seeing the experiments that show that plants and seedlings grown underneath pyramids have similar electroculture effects, I became a believer. It's amazing.
Yeah, and utilizing pyramids, you know, I've heard a lot of people doing that and going to different pyramids around the world and overcoming diseases. I was listening to a show a while back where this lady was talking about where was it? India, I think it was, in order to heal from stage 4 cancers, catastrophic cancers, they would literally have people lay in a compost pile without any clothes on. And they would do this. And these people were having incredible results with extra cells growing in their body, is the best way I can say it, reversing that. And, you know, it's like, wow, that's so amazing. And it gets into the microbiome and assuming it's true, It may not be true, but assuming it's true, there's so much going on with the organisms in the soil and this ambient electricity in the air. It's everywhere, isn't it?
Oh, it's amazing. And I just love how plants give us a non-biased way of showing that this stuff works.
That's so cool. Okay, so for people that are interested, electricfertilizer.com, that would be the first place to start, right?
Yep, start off there.
And then you can join the Facebook group.
Yeah. And in a few weeks, we'll be opening up the other website. That's going to be
awesome.
My primary focus going forward.
Awesome. Yeah. So what areas going forward, you're going to be researching these other sort of systems and stuff, or what's it looking like going forward?
So going forward, we have a number of partnerships in place. We're developing relationships with other people who do electroculture around the world. And we also do our own research. I'm going to be leveraging the last decade or decade and a half of research that I've been doing personally and turning it into courses and additional books and additional product lines as well.
That's so cool. Wow, man. I'll just live vicariously through you because that just sounds like so much fun.
Oh man, it's amazing.
That's right. Do you do this full time, or are you doing something else full time and doing this part time, or what's your?
I think it'd be amazing to do this full time, but I do this on a part time basis, so it takes a lot of my personal time away from family.
Yeah,
but it's my love. It's been my love for a long time. Full time, I work as a systems and test engineer.
Okay.
So, but this has been my love for such a long time, and it's just a pleasure to do. It's a pleasure to teach and to be involved with the community. It's awesome.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Yeah. Well, David, thank you so much for your time. And I'm glad that you shared a lot of this, sort of filling in some gaps on electroculture. And I appreciate you spending your time with us. And as we were saying before we started recording, I apologize going back and forth for so long about trying to get this together, but I'm glad we did. And people can also follow you on Instagram too, right?
That's right. I'm on Instagram. I can't remember my Instagram right now, but it's linked to my website. And I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
Awesome. All right, David, thanks so much for being on the show today. Super appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the invite.
Awesome. All right. I hope you guys enjoyed that show, episode 772. That was pretty cool. We talked to David quite extensively off the air. That was really fun. I'm going to put links to everything we talked about at extremehealthradio.com/772. And I will also put links down in the description below. But curious what you guys think about that. It's not really Electroculture 2.0, even though I called it that, but it's a different type of electroculture. And, I think one of the most beneficial things that we can do is growing our own food and becoming self-sustainable, and being able to grow, even if it's a small amount of your own food. I think, reconnecting with nature and the cycles of life. I mean, Kate and I talk about this all the time about how important it is to infuse yourself into the cyclical nature of what life is. And ancient cultures would always do this. They would always, if it were summer, they would be preparing for the fall, and if it were fall, they would be preparing for the winter, and they would store up food, and they would get ready for the next season's harvest. And they would be always connected to the earth and how they lived. And they would get direct sunlight onto their skin and into their eyes. And, being involved in the death cycle and the birth process and all of these aspects of growing and living, and through growing our own food and hunting our own food, this, I believe, is where we need to get back to as a civilization and as a culture. And so there's obviously many aspects to this. And if you're listening to this as you live in the city and you work a 9 to 5 and, that's your life, there's obviously things that you can do that are just small, like they're little micro movements that you can do, like just simply bringing more plants into your office if you work like in an office, or growing some sprouts in your kitchen if you live in a high-rise building, for example, and don't have access to the soil, or maybe that's just taking your sunglasses off and going outside without sunglasses on, or there's a lot of things that we can do to plug ourselves back into the cyclical nature of our existence here on Earth. And I think that the more you do that, the healthier you become. And there's just no doubt about it. The more you extract yourself from nature and from the cycles of life and from your circadian biology. I mean, this is Dr. Jack Kruse's whole point, is reconnecting to nature through sunlight. And the more you disconnect yourself in that way and you unplug yourself from nature and from God and from source, the sicker you become and the quicker you age. And so the whole point of all of this is to get back into nature. And I was telling Kate this the other day, I was modestly interested in gardening, since I got involved in health 20 years ago in 2003, just because of the idea that you can grow mineral rich food, using dilute ocean water or rock dust or these types of things to modify your soils to uptake more or to imbue more minerals into your soil so your plants can grow bigger and stronger and be healthier. And so I've always been moderately interested in this. And then when Big C Little V hit 3 years ago, I've always wanted to have a garden, but I never really had the kick in the pants until that started. And as soon as that started, I was like, okay, now there's a whole nother aspect, I should say, of this idea that they don't want you to be able to be self-sufficient. And just put in at the end of that any word you want: self-sufficient with your health, self-sufficient with your education, self-sufficient with your finances. The more they can get you dependent on their services and what they're trying to give to us, that's what they want, because then you become somewhat of a slave. And the more you can extract yourself and become someone who's self-reliant, you can take care of yourself. You can grow a lot of your own food. You can, get some chickens. You can get a goat. And the more that you can do these things, the more empowered you become. And for me, I don't know if you're like this, but when I'm told I can't do something, I kind of want to do it. If someone says, you're going to eat bugs and you're going to own nothing and be happy, I kind of want to do the opposite. And so for me, I'm working on becoming more self-reliant and more hopeful and more desirous to do these types of things that cause us to be more self-reliant. And growing food is one of those things. And, having some chickens. So for if you're new to the show, we've got about 10 chickens. We're in Southern California in a neighborhood, and we've got 10 chickens, we've got 12, I think, fruit trees, working on getting some more, and we've got a bunny rabbit take his poop, put it in the compost, take the compost, put it on the garden grows, you eat the peach, you eat the apple, you put the core back in the compost. I mean, it's this awesome cycle, right? And so, I guess if you want to call it artificially amplifying the growth of one of those cycles, one of those spokes in the wheel, which is growing more food that's healthier and faster, the more you can speed up that process of, taking the scraps from that and composting it. But I just think that was really cool. And so we're going to keep our towers out there, our antennas that we have and that we learned from Matt Roski. I'll put a link to his Electroculture show down below as well. That was really cool. But really cool. So now I talked to David off the air, and he wanted to give a discount on his devices. And, I read you the prices before, and they're not very expensive. They're only like 30, 40, 50 bucks. I think 50 bucks is the most expensive one. And so I would recommend joining his Facebook group and, plugging into that community and then asking him questions on which devices would be good for you. Because like we said in the show, everyone's got a different setup, right? So he's going to give me a discount code, which is really cool. And if you enter that, there'll be some kind of discount. I don't know if it's going to be 5, 10, or 15%. It all depends on how much it costs him, what his margins are, right? So, but in any event, there'll be somewhat of a discount, and I'll put it down below. It's either going to be EHR5, EHR10, or EHR15, or EHR7. By the way, our new discount code for the ozone machine was EHR10, but now it's EHR7. So that's something that was beyond our control. But if you want to buy an ozone machine that we talked about on today's show in one of the commercials from Promo Life, EHR7 will get you that discount. And our discount code on the Dragon's Blood, I'd really recommend you guys get some of those. Wow, talk about a powerful product. EHR, I think it's 10 on that one. And then the vitamin E product, that's from MitoLife, that's EHR 15. So I'll put links to those down below. So, when people come on the show, it's really important for them to get some more exposure. And so, join his Facebook group and say hello and tell him that you heard about him from us, because that will encourage him to do more interviews and get the word out more. And that helps, him as well. And then also, whenever you can support us, either through our store or if you want to join as a patron, we have 3 tiers to choose from. You can join up on that. That's a $5 a month or 15 or 30 a month, depending on which tier. I'm putting out all kinds of really cool products, protocols on there, by the way. So that's available down below. And if you like someone online that puts out good content, do them a favor and write a review or share their podcast or do something from a karmic perspective that's, good juju. It's good energy, right? If someone does something you like, it doesn't have to be with money. If they have an Amazon account like we do, for example, you can just click over whenever you make an Amazon purchase, and that helps support, for us as well as, any other, people you like. So, or it could just be writing a review or writing an Amazon review of their book if they have one of those, or whatever the case may be. So it's good to put out good positive energy out there and support people that are doing good things, whether it's financial or just sharing their work. But wow, that was cool. So I'll put links to his books. I think they're down below as well. Electroculture, Electropermaculture, and Electrohorticulture too. And this was episode 772. So if you want to send this interview on to maybe your gardener friend, or maybe someone that does consulting for you, or, maybe take it to someone who works in a local gardening center kind of place. If they've never heard of Electroculture, this would be a good interview to send on to them. So I appreciate you guys doing that. And we'll be back next week with another show. And if you're new to the website and to our work goes back 10 years. So we have 771 other episodes. And what we do is we play our best of episodes 6 days a week. And then new shows typically come out on Sunday evenings, unless something, happens. But typically Sunday evening is the new show. And that will say new show on, if you're subscribed on iTunes or Spotify or whatever. And that show will be there on Sunday evening. And the other 6 days of the week, you get to hear our best of shows going back 10 years. So subscribe and get access to all this cool information. If there's a show that looks good to you, you can listen to it or share it, or one that doesn't look good, then just skip it. There'll be a new show the next night. So you guys rock. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. Thank you for all you patrons that have joined and supporting our work. And the new protocols will be out at the last day of every month. So did some protocols this month on lung health and nebulization, as well as my yearly cleanse protocol. So that's a cleansing and detox protocol that you can follow month by month throughout the year. And I give you a lot of different options to choose from. And so lots of different ways to do cleansing and detox, from parasites to heavy metals to chelation to coffee enemas, and what to do and when. And so that's going to be coming out the end of this month on Patreon. So I appreciate that. Let's see what else. Anything else? I think that's about it. You guys rock. Thank you so much. Episode 772, extremehealthradio.com/772. Thank you for your support and for your listenership over the years. You guys are amazing. Thank you again, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode.
No material on this blog is intended to suggest that you should not seek professional medical care. Always work with qualified medical professionals, even if you educate yourself in the field of live food, nutrition, and alternative medicine. I'm not a doctor, nor am I offering readers medical advice of any kind. None of the information offered here should be interpreted as a diagnosis of any disease, nor an attempt to treat or prevent any disease or condition. While information in this blog is discussed in the context of numerous conditions, it can be dangerous to take action based on any information in this blog or to start any health program without first consulting a health professional. The content found here is for informational purposes only and is in no way intended as medical advice, as a substitute for medical counseling, or as a treatment/cure for any disease or health condition, and nor should it be continued as such. Always work with a qualified healthcare professional before making any changes to your diet, prescription drug use, lifestyle, or exercise activities. This information is provided as is, and the reader/viewer assumes all risks from the use, non-use, or misuse of this information.